It's now my pleasure to introduce you to the President and CEO of Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, Brad Ferguson. 2 years ago, the City of Edmonton took a bit of a risk. The city abandoned its traditional way of selecting somebody from somewhere that maybe we didn't know or didn't know well, and this time they decided to select an entrepreneur, a young guy with a very interesting track record. Brad Ferguson became the 5th CEO of Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, the city-owned agency which is responsible for stewarding economic growth in the greater Edmonton region. On day one, he defined the objective. He wanted the Edmonton region to outperform every other economic jurisdiction in North America consistently over the next 20 years. It didn't matter whether oil was $40 a barrel or $140 a barrel. He's built a leadership capacity throughout the organization that is now responsible for Edmonton tourism, Enterprise Edmonton, the Shaw Conference Centre, the Edmonton Research Park, Make Something Edmonton, Startup Edmonton, and is a joint venture partner in Tech Edmonton. He also has brought a culture of winning back to the city-owned agency that he helped bring such events to Edmonton as the Red Bull Crashed Ice, the Tour of Alberta, the ITU World Triathlon, and the FIFA World Women's Cup. But Brad knows that economic development is a team sport. It's a team game. Success only comes when Edmonton operates with a unified voice and will continue to position Edmonton as Canada's youngest, fastest growing city, and it will be an economic powerhouse for years to come. Please join me in welcoming President and CEO Brad Ferguson.
Frank Spinelli was an Edmonton legend. In 1951, he came to Canada from Italy with very little and found his way to our city. It was a place of opportunity for those with entrepreneurial spirit, and Frank set out to build the Italian Center Shop, a place where people could originally just buy Italian newspapers, pop, and some espresso. And 50 years later, is really a retail institution that's run by his daughter Teresa today and her team that's here today. And that's lasted through boom and bust and boom and bust and boom and bust of the Alberta economy. I had the opportunity to meet Frank Spinelli in 1994 when I was working at Procter & Gamble. World Cup soccer was on, and that was the place to be, and I skipped out of work early, grabbed a seat and an espresso. Brazil beat Italy that year in penalty kicks, if you recall. And afterwards, Mr. Spinelli and I were kind of moping around where we kind of opened up a conversation, and he looked at me and started by saying, "You know, you don't look Italian enough to be this upset." So after some bantering around a little bit, I had the opportunity to engage him in a real conversation, and I asked him, what's the most important thing that he learned in the retail business? And Mr. Spinelli, he looked at me like he looked like in this picture and said, "You got to give customers what they want," which is what he's always been known to say, but more importantly, he then said, "It is what you do in the good times that determines how well you perform in the bad times." And I've never forgotten these words of wisdom. I speak those words often, and they're oh so relevant today. 2014 was a great year. Last January, following this impact lunch, I started characterizing the city and our economy as in a state of utopia. It was good times. We had just come off 5.5 GDP growth in 2013. We are likely finishing this year at about 4.7% in 2014. We experienced population growth of about 3.9%, which is like another 30,000 Edmontonians. And that's with only about 4.8% unemployment. We had a $95 price of oil for the first half of the year. The Edmonton economy was on fire. We were ranked number one in a lot of categories, and we were responsible for about 40% of all net new jobs in the country. which is pretty remarkable for one city, one jurisdiction. KPMG ranked Canada as the #1 most tax-advantaged country in the world and Edmonton as the #1 most tax-advantaged city in Canada. And the Conference Board of Canada, with their announcement yesterday, let's put that aside, they were predicting about 4.9% GDP growth for Edmonton in 2014, and they had us as the top-performing city in the country for 2015, 16, 17, and 18. You know, it kind of looked like this. It was euphoric. And amongst all that euphoria at EEDC, we thought it was important to heed the advice of Mr. Spinelli, and we asked a critical question, that being, what should an economic development agency do when it's not in the job creation business, because jobs were being created regardless of what we do? What should we do when the times are good that will help us when the economic cycle turns? And that was our entire focus for the last 2 years. And we asked that with intention because in 2006, 2007, when the price of oil continued to grow, went up over $100 and increased all the way to $140, we got out of the economic development business and started focusing on quality of life issues, which are important for building a great city, but must never come at the expense of being competitive. And what happened? As the chart shows, in 2009, the price of oil plummeted from $140 to $40 in 6 months, a $100 drop. And we got caught flat-footed, and the city suffered. So we embraced this critical question at EEDC over the last year, and as a way of providing a little bit of a year in review and what we've been working on, I thought we'd go through some of the top 10 things that we believe help us when the economy starts to turn. Over the last year, we welcomed, first of all, CEO Tom Ruth to the city of Edmonton at the Edmonton International Airport. And we worked really closely with his team at the Edmonton International Airport to build our business not only with WestJet, but to add 3 new carriers to serve the Edmonton market. Last year, we welcomed direct flights to Reykjavik on Iceland Air, to Dallas-Fort Worth and Los Angeles on American Airlines, part of the One World Alliance, first time they were in Edmonton, and a new direct flight to Amsterdam starting May 5th on KLM Air France. When I started at EEDC and EIA really had no joint initiatives together, very few, and today we're absolutely inseparable, and Edmonton is winning as a result. We focused on external marketing. For the first time, we assumed true responsibility for building the Edmonton brand in association with the City of Edmonton, and we integrated Make Something Edmonton under the EEDC banner. Having a common set of brand attributes allowed us to launch our first tourism consumer campaign, which won recognition and awards across the country. And almost 100% of our digital assets had to be recreated over the last year to show a city that's rich with people and entertainment, having fun, being involved, as opposed to empty sites and empty postcards of just the legislature building or the pyramids or the river valley with no people in it. All that's been done, and it was an example in the video that you saw today, where we now have those assets and we can make them available to the business community. So like BioWare, you can customize very easily and very economically these promotional and recruiting tools to allow you to build your business. More than anything else, 2014 will be remembered as the year of downtown. With the final approval of Rogers Place done, the City of Edmonton took a true risk and a decision to consolidate its office space in the downtown core. Stantec made a 62-story announcement, and we have Delta Hotels, the Hyatt Place now under construction, MacEwan University Center of Music, Norquest's expansion, and Enbridge's selfless decision to consolidate in the Kelly Ramsey and the Manulife Place buildings as opposed to building a 4th office tower in the downtown core. Our efforts are all about creating vibrancy and increasing residential capacity in the downtown area, and that'll come to reality with an additional 11 new condo towers that will result in 22 cranes in the sky in 33 city blocks throughout 2015 and 2016. It was an absolutely monumental year for downtown. The entrepreneurial ecosystem, something that is absolutely at the heart of the Edmonton brand. We integrated Startup Edmonton into the EEDC family, and our entrepreneur community really came alive. But Tech Edmonton was ranked as within the top 10 business incubators in the world and number 3 in North America. Last year, they worked with 126 companies who launched 140 products out of this region, earned $136 million of revenue, about 30% that's coming from exports, and they grew employment by 25% per year, and they raised $75 million in new capital of early-stage financing. 80 of those 136 companies are in the healthcare, bio, and ICT area, and it's no wonder that the federal government stepped in and picked Tech Edmonton to build out the new Tech Health Accelerator, furthering positioning Edmonton as a healthcare technology leader in Western Canada. And we looked at foreign investment as well, quite significantly. Our Enterprise Edmonton team structured what will eventually become probably the biggest single deal in Edmonton's history with Gas Canada and Sino Energy out of China to develop a 5-phase, $4 billion petrochemical and LNG liquefaction facility in Sturgeon County, including a $30 million natural gas business incubator in the Edmonton Research Park. It was a good year. We focused on event attraction because event attraction we sell today and it lasts us for multiple years, especially during downturns. It's probably the best summer weather-wise we've had in recent history. And our event strategy with the City of Edmonton continues to rack up wins and filling the calendar with experiences like the Tour of Alberta cycling race, the ITU World Triathlon, FIFA's U18 World Cup, and as well as our festivals and a renewed approach to the Canadian Finals Rodeo, and now has the confidence to go after a Commonwealth Games bid in 2022. These events are critical for building Edmonton's brand and engaging citizens and driving tourism and making Edmonton appealing for that 18 to 36-year-old crowd that is our future workforce and our future taxpayers. And they create a rhythm and a pulse and an energy that builds excitement and confidence in our business community, in our youth, and throughout all Edmontonians. We ended 2014 with a tremendous work being done by the municipal leaders from the surrounding communities under the Capital Region Board to unanimously endorse the movement towards a unified economic development and marketing strategy for the greater Edmonton region. This is a huge step forward, and I'd like to compliment the chair of the Capital Region Board, Nolan Kraus, the mayor of St. Albert, and all 24 mayors from the Edmonton region in building the foundation of what should be a much more integrated approach to economic development and marketing of our region going forward. It wasn't all easy. We definitely had some challenges last year. Air Canada canceled a direct flight to London in direct retaliation to securing the Iceland-Air relationship. Federal Minister Kenney made what I believe is to be an economically irrational decision on the temporary foreign worker program that is not in the best long-term interest of our country. And with each of these challenges, we emerged stronger as a city because we operated with a collective and united voice. And to that I owe great thanks to our Mayor, Don Iveson, to our board chair, Barry Travers, to Tom Ruth, CEO at Edmonton International Airports, and to probably the friend and person I relied on most over the last year, the former head of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, James Cumming. James and I spent many nights over the last year talking about the importance of unified voice and a vision for the city. And I welcome him into the world of federal politics going forward as the candidate for the Conservative Party in Edmonton Centre. I wish you the best of luck, and you'll serve us well. And with James's departure, we have new leaders coming to the city. Janet Riopol coming in as the head of the Chamber of Commerce. We have Tim Reed as the new CEO of Northlands, Kevin Ubelin as the CEO of AIMCO, and Dr. David Turpin as the new president of the University of Alberta. These are all important leaders that need to start beating to the same drum, and if we all speak together and work as one voice, we're a powerful, powerful city. Which brings us a little bit to national positioning. Last year we set out with the goal to separate Edmonton from a Tier 2 cities like Victoria, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg, Quebec City, and Halifax. And because we wanted to be associated with Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton, and those were the top 5 we wanted people to be talking about in the city. Our economy, our university, our research, our capital investment, our entrepreneurs, our people punch all above their weights in terms of contribution, and last year we set out to be recognized for that. Last year we had more federal minister visits and announcements than ever before in history here in Edmonton, including that with the Prime Minister. We had federal opposition caucuses here, and newspapers across the country were filled with stories of the transformation that was happening in our city. into one that was full of entrepreneurs, risk takers, and innovators that were acutely aware of our role in building a stronger nation. I'm extremely proud of the team that we have built and the leadership team that we have in place at EDC. Cliff Higuchi is leading the fastest growing mid-tier conference center in the country. Maggie Davison is leading the fastest growing tourism destination marketing organization in the country. Glenn Vanstone is leading the fastest growing economic zone in the country. Kevin Weidlich is leading the best municipal branding efforts across the country right now. Ellen Hollinger, who leads our human resource team, is really of the highest performing economic development agency in the country. And Derek Hudson oversees our entrepreneurial ecosystem, but really oversees the whole corporate service model that allows us to deliver on a single platform for multiple divisions, which deliver on our mandate from council. And over the last year, across our divisions, we created over $165 million of direct economic impact through our activities, and that's about a 10.1x return on taxpayer dollars. And during that process, we've reduced our operating budget that comes from the city. When I started, it was at 43%. We've reduced that to 38% this year, and we're on track to be 33% by 2017. It was a great year, almost utopian. So good, in fact, that we started sleeping with one eye open because we knew it couldn't continue. And because that's usually when people start to think it will continue. So as we look forward, yes, 2014 was a great year, but it was also a nervous year. We were worried about the markets, we're overpriced, we were worried about housing prices in Canadian major cities. We became concerned about projections of straight-line population growth, adding 30,000 people to Edmonton every year, 100,000 people to Alberta every year. We knew that that can't continue. And we were alarmed by the sudden surge in the tight oil supply out of the United States, and we became absolutely fearful of the growing social unrest resulting from a number of unemployed and disengaged youth across the world. And when we start to worry about factors outside of our control, we use scenarios to manage our discussions. I use this framework that was provided in a booklet to you with over 400 companies and government organizations over the last 10 years. And although it's not perfect, it provides a great source of discussion back in your offices with your executive teams, and I encourage you to follow the instructions and do it. Just as an overview, we work on an axis where either the world is in total global recession or global expansion, two endpoints that never end. As well as we have the price of oil, whether in Alberta, whether it's high or whether it's low, and that divides us into 4 quadrants, which are 4 scenarios. We have a competitive boom where everything is going really strong, high price of oil, and the world is expanding. It's a lovely place. When the world's contracting and we have a high price of oil, this is very good for Alberta. We have a population boom. If the price of oil collapses, we end up in a budget crunch. And when the world is expanding, we have a price of oil, we have a competitiveness crunch. If we look back over the last 7 years, in 2006, 2007, this place was on fire. The world economy was expanding, oil prices were high, we were leveraged to the tilt. It was rocking. Until March 2007, where Bear Stearns collapsed, and then September in 2007 when Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the biggest financial collapse in recent history. Oil went from $140 to $40 in 6 months, settling around $58, which created a population boom scenario in Alberta and Edmonton starting in 2010, 2011, 2012. But then the WCS, the Western Crude Select, which is our price, started trading at a significant discount, now known as the bitumen bubble, in early 2013, and it rose again in about to $95, let's say, starting in 2014, and then we've seen the price dramatically start to drop as the global economy started to pick up, and that has us moving from a budget crunch scenario to one that is a competitiveness crunch, which tends to be more structural and lasts for quite some time. Today, oil has plummeted from $105.93 a year ago, or 6 months ago, to $46.07 at noon today. It's a $60 drop. And it's been driven by a geopolitical agenda of OPEC states, specifically Saudi Arabia, in direct defense of its market share in the United States. And it's going to continue. It's the goal of putting high-cost producers around the world out of business, countries like Russia, Iran, Nigeria, Venezuela, and of course the U.S. shale industry. Companies in Alberta will be significantly affected, amplified by us having a competitiveness problem. In the energy and energy services industry, our operating costs are up 50% over the last 5 years, driven by wages that have increased about 6% a year. Our investment in innovation and technology is 30% lower than the Canadian average, and more importantly, it's 80% lower than our competitors to the south of the border, who have invested in new technologies and driven down their cost of production to under $55 a barrel on now what is 9 million barrels a day. So, as we expect capital investment to be reduced by about 30 to 35% in the conventional business, and reduced by 15 to 20% in the oil sands in northern Alberta, you're seeing layoffs have started, and there will be some pain in the energy sector for those that have failed to plan, failed to invest in innovation and technology, and have enjoyed the inflationary euphoria over the last few years. Where are prices going? No one knows, and if anyone claims they do, they're likely to be the same people that claim they saw this coming. So, we have some pain coming in parts of our economy, but only parts of our economy. And we have some pain coming through our provincial government. Our revenue model at the provincial level continues to fail us, as strategies we put in place that we work so hard to implement once again can't absorb a 20 to 30% delta in the downward price of oil, and that is debilitating for us as a province. I sympathize with our Premier, who has inherited this problem of revenue volatility, as these are the same problems that we experienced in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, now 2014, and it will be the same volatility problem we'll experience in 2020, 2030, and 2040 unless we take action and show political leadership necessary to make the incremental changes to our tax structure, our savings policies, our discipline around expenditure growth, and our transparency around financial reporting such that the public can understand our financial situation and support him in making the tough decisions. It's what you do in the good times that determines how you perform in the bad times. And the good news is we're all on the same team, and there are 1.2 million people in the greater Edmonton region that are here to help. There's 1,000 people in this room that just applauded. Help in building the best innovation system in the country by rethinking what's the role of government, which is policy, strategy, funding, and measurement, to be done centrally and allow the cities to take a much more active role in the delivery of local things like programs, capital, facilities, networks, and mentorship. To help build the best possible post-secondary system in the country that brings together our universities and colleges to deliver Campus Edmonton first, geographically, before the grand ambition of Campus Alberta. Or help in building the best Alberta brand possible by investing in the reputations of our two excellent cities that are ranked consistently in the top 10 for things like innovation, education, healthy people, inclusion, tolerance, cultural diversity, and environmental leadership, the very things that we're trying to become as a province, as opposed to expending all of our marketing dollars defending ourselves against every activist. Never waste a good crisis, I say. It's a perfect time to come together municipally and provincially with unified purpose to rethink how we can work together better for a better solution. So as we look forward to the year ahead, the greater Edmonton region will outperform the southern part of the province and will likely maintain a 2 to 2.5% growth rate in GDP. I feel confident in that assertion because when you look at the economy, similar to what the mayor said, we don't want to overreact because of one industry. This is a very diversified economy, and a bunch of pillars are firing on all cylinders. What we will focus on is our energy services industry will still be sustained as shutdowns and maintenance projects in the heavy oil industry will continue to grow and will continue to be serviced out of Edmonton as a logistics and transportation hub. Our forestry product industries will continue to expand with the resurgence of the United States housing market and growth in global demand in Edmonton, but also in places around the world driven specifically out of China. Our agriculture and agri-foods industry will continue to expand with record yields, easier movement of goods, and continued global demand for food. Our tourism industry will grow, buoyed by a lower Canadian dollar, more direct flights, and marketing programs that we've worked so hard to put in place. The pain in our local manufacturing industry will be offset by a lower Canadian dollar and continued expansion that will follow the U.S. energy market for a while. Our downtown projects, with shovels in the ground and with cranes in the sky, include 3 office towers, 2 hotels, 11 condominiums, apartment complexes, 2 educational facilities, 2 museums, a big audacious arena complex, and an LRT line to move more people in and out of our downtown core. We have an increase in available office space that comes as a result, and our low tax and low cost of business environment makes us perfectly positioned to be attracting companies from other parts of the country. Our financial service industry continues to grow, and our attraction of international institutional private equity has never been higher, all looking to establish presence here, knowing that this is a long-term play and not something that's going to be just a short fluctuation. And yes, they're investing in our boring, yield-based Canadian-controlled corporations that aren't as sexy as those in stock exchanges all the time, but I'll tell you, the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low as a result, and they're smart buys for people that are coming in. And lastly, our major event strategy will bring one of the great summers of all time ahead of us this year with FIFA's Women's World Cup, the Tour of Alberta, the Marathon, the ITU World Triathlon, the Fringe Festival, Folk Festival, and all those things that make these summers here so fantastic and draw in people from 500 kilometers and around every year. And if we're lucky, 2015 will also have us chosen as the host city for the 2022 Commonwealth Games. In Edmonton, things will be better than many anticipate. We will outperform our little sister city to the south. But I'm not asking you to ignore the realities. There are many positive fronts. There are very positives on all fronts that can't be forgotten, especially when a lot of the headlines are going to be concerned with provincial budget worries, things like that. We have a wonderful place that continues to grow. But it's a time that we need to focus on our balance sheets, a time to come down from the hyperinflated euphoria. It's a time to have constructive discussions with your people on wages, which have been escalating out of control. It's a time to look for acquisitions and diversify your revenue opportunities in other markets. It's a time to take advantage of growth in other jurisdictions and to attract new sources of investment capital. It's a time to be humble, being from Alberta. And it's a time to have a serious conversation about our fiscal picture and to make incremental changes to our tax structure. In closing, I'd like to confirm to you that this is a powerful city within a powerful province powered by 1.2 million people that understand the power of speaking with a unified voice. A unified voice is making change to our image and reputation across the country, and we're just getting started. Unfortunately, we get myopic, and we think our assets are those things under the ground and not those things between our ears. We're planning for a very competitive world that's probably here to stay for a while, and we need to operate with more intention than ever before. Those that do will reap great rewards. They are the tough, and the tough will acquire market share. Those that do not, well, those strategies are simply built on hope, waiting for better days when oil price will return back to $100. And to them, all I can say is that I hope you enjoyed utopia while it lasted. This city is operating with intention under the leadership of Mayor Don Iveson and a very strong city council. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to be responsible for the performance of one of its entities, EEDC, at a time when the economic winds have shifted. This is the time where we find out if the hard work we did in the good times will help us through, and I think it will. Thank you very much. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Ferguson. That was wonderful, Brad. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. You're going to have a seat here, and I understand you're going to play reporter with Premier Prentice in a moment. I used to be a reporter, Brad. It's going to be a hell of a pay cut for you. We do want to thank a really great sponsor that we had for this event, the Edmonton Journal Capital Ideas, and all of Capital Ideas members. We asked them to put questions through to the guests that we're going to have here today, and then we expanded our program to include Premier Prentice. And so we decided to put those programs, so some of those questions, online on edmontonjournal.com, and Brad is taking part in answering those questions. And so you can check that out on Capital Ideas, edmontonjournal.com, and Brad will be answering many of those questions via video. Now I'd like to introduce Premier Jim Prentice. Jim Prentice became Premier of this province in September 2014, so not that long ago. In addition to serving as both Premier and President of the Executive Council, Mr. Prentice holds multiple ministerial appointments, including overseeing the portfolios for international and intergovernmental relations and for Aboriginal relations, and he also serves as the chair of the Planning and Priorities Committee. His extensive public service dates back to 2004. He served 3 terms federally as the member for Calgary Centre North. And in addition for that, of course, he's been in the private sector as well, most recently as a senior vice president with CIBC. He has a long and distinguished career. He moved here from Ontario to Grande Cache when he was 13 years old. And he stayed ever since. And other than his trips to Ottawa to represent us, he's obviously done extremely, extremely well. He lives in Calgary with his wife, Karen. They have 3 daughters. And Jim's proud to tell us that he now has a 2nd grandchild. Ladies and gentlemen, Premier Jim Prentice. Mr. Prentice, welcome.
Thank you.
I have a reporter waiting for you right here. So what is going to happen is that there's going to be a conversation. Brad talked during his presentation about having a grown-up conversation. I think that was a line that Mayor Iveson had at one time. And so without any further ado, Brad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Grant. You've done a great job today. Mr. Premier, first of all, delight you could be here. Absolutely delight you could be here. Welcome to life outside the Dome in Edmonton, and welcome to the Shaw Conference Centre. Why don't I give it over to you, though, and why don't you kick things off a little bit with some opening remarks, maybe comment on what you've heard, and really set the stage for this discussion.
Well, I'm happy to do that. It's great to be here, and thank you, Grant, for your kind comments, and thank you, Brad, for your leadership. I know all 3 levels of government are represented here today, and I think that speaks to the importance of the work of EEDC and to your leadership. And it's just an incredible turnout in the room, and I've been very much looking forward to the discussion today and responding to questions. First, let me comment on Edmonton. And you know, this is a world-class city with world-class political leadership in the form of Mayor Iveson. I just want to acknowledge the working relationship that we have, how much we enjoy working together, and what a bright future we have here in this city. I love Edmonton. I'm unapologetic about that. I'm very clear about it. I lived here when I was a young university student. I came from Grande Cache, as Grant mentioned, and spent most of my university years in this city. And Karen and I live here. As the Premier, we have a place across the river, and this is where we make our home, and this is where we are all week. And so we just love this city and enjoy spending time here. I'm not prepared to concede yet that it's utopia, but it's a wonderful city and a great place to be. You know, we've heard in the comments that Brad made, and firstly the comments the Mayor made, that when we talk about city building, we're also talking about province building, and I couldn't agree more with that. And I think, Brad, in your comments, you accurately captured my sense of Edmonton and the dynamic city that it's become, the young city that it's become. It's dynamic, it's entrepreneurial, it's innovative, it's focused on manufacturing, on research, and all of the things that I think you accurately encapsulated. This year, and I want to say this in front of the many leaders who are here in this room, this year will be about leadership, and it will be about confidence. And I'm not going to disagree with Frank Spinelli, but I'm going to turn on its head his motto, which is to say that it is what we're going to do in the bad times that are going to determine how successful we will be in the good times. And so I approach what we're dealing with an enormous amount of confidence that we have the ability to do that. And, you know, let me just start with the difficulties that we are going to face. This is going to be a very difficult and a very challenging year. And, you know, I'll start with oil prices, which of course are the elephant in the room. I began cautioning Albertans several months ago that we were in a downward trajectory on oil prices. I started doing that at $75 a barrel. What I would do right now for $75 per barrel oil prices. I spoke to the Edmonton Chamber a month ago in December. At that time, I warned about the effects of oil prices at $63 a barrel. Today, the WTI price is $47 per barrel. And we don't appear yet to have hit the bottom, at least in a predictable way. And so, you know, I don't talk about this because I'm enthusiastic about what this brings for our province. I can't talk the prices up. Beating your elephant will not make it fly, is an adage. And so we're going to have to deal with this. This is a problem not of the creation of anyone in this room, but we're going to have to deal with it. As government leaders, as business leaders, and as civil societies, it will be a challenging year, but I put it to you that it's also going to be a transformational year. You know, in terms of the scale of the difficulty that we face, let me just be perfectly clear about this. At the current revenue projections of, let's say, $62 per barrel of oil, this opens up in our provincial budget a $6 to $7 billion revenue hole. If prices persist at sub $50 per barrel, it will be even worse. And so to put that in scale, in context, and I receive a lot of useful advice from people about what needs to be done about this, and I welcome all of it. But I think there's only been a gradual awakening on the part of Albertans about what the sheer scale of this means. $6 to $7 billion equates to the entire payroll of the government of Alberta. This is not about, you know, shaving down the salaries of the top Sunshine List employees of the government of Alberta. I could terminate the employment of every single employee of the government of Alberta, leaving aside health care, and it would not fill a $6 to $7 billion revenue hole. This equates roughly to all of the money that we spend on education in this province. And so these are significant numbers, and you know, the question that we need to be focused on collectively as Albertans is, what are we going to do about this? And how are we going to use this as an opportunity for the transformation of our province? And let me just start by saying that we are tough, we are resilient, we are entrepreneurial, and we have the capacity to get through this, and we will get through this. I am confident. We've seen low prices for oil before. We will see low prices for oil again. This is a commodity cycle. We will get through it, and we will persist. And if you have any doubts about that, read yesterday's Wall Street Journal, and you'll see the comments of some of the CEOs of our largest energy companies who talk about actually increasing production of oil from the oil sands in the face of the circumstances that we're up against. However, it is a time that's going to require, on the part of all of us, caution, prudence, and discipline in terms of public expenditures, and I would submit in terms of private expenditures. It is a time to be careful, and it is a time, I think, for all of us to collectively remind ourselves about burden sharing and about the fact that we are Albertans together, and that means something. This province is not a work camp. This province has proud traditions, a proud history. We're in this together. We got into it together, and we're going to get out of it together. And I think it's important to remember that. A couple things I'll just indicate as we move forward, and I'm looking forward to some of the questions and answers, but we're going to face tough choices, and this is a government that's prepared to make it. We need, first and foremost, discipline in public expenditures, and you're going to see that from this government. Secondly, it is important that we maintain one of the greatest assets that we have that will help us get through that, and that is the AAA credit rating of the province of Alberta, which speaks to the fact that we are in a very strong financial position, well capable of weathering this storm as long as we make the right choices. And that refers to the quality of our balance sheet, our tax competitiveness, all of the things that comprise the Alberta Advantage. Thirdly, we cannot wait for high prices to return. I think it's fair to say that everyone in this province has had enough of the roller coasters. And so it's time to deal with this. It's time to put in place a long-term plan. It's time to project into our public finances that are less volatile, that provide greater certainty, whether you're trying to operate a business as many of the people in this room are, or whether you're trying to operate as something as complex and important as the University of Alberta. It is time for certainty in terms of our revenue, whether you are speaking of investor certainty or institutional certainty. And finally, I would just say that we are hard at work. And Grant referred to the various things that I do with the government. The thing that I'm doing the most of right now is a different approach to budgeting than we have followed in this province in modern times, certainly. Typically, the budget of the Government of Alberta has been prepared by the Treasury Board, working together with the Minister of Finance. In this case, the Minister of Finance and I together chair a committee, a special cabinet committee that has begun the preparation of the fiscal plan for the government for the next 8 years, starting with a blank sheet of paper. Everything is on the table. And so we're hard at work. That includes the economic projections, the capital budgeting, the operating budgeting, the existing commitments, and the revenue projections. And so that's the work that we're at. This will all crystallize in the form of the budget, which will be presented later this winter. But we're hard at it. And so again, thank you for welcoming me here. And Brad, your comments, I think, really set the stage for an important discussion that we must all have. Thank you.
Good. So, you know, you've been wonderfully consistent in your messaging, and I think it's a little bit of, and it started at $75 and it's worked its way down, and it's been a good dose of reality for a lot of people in the room and a lot of people in Edmonton and across the province. But, you know, one of the things as a premier, you're leader of the province, you've got to put the brutal facts of reality in front of people, but at the same time you need to inspire them. How do you balance both of those things today, especially coming into the role? You're trying to build rapport with people. You need to inspire them still and inspire the rest of the country still about Alberta's future, but still do the brutal facts of reality. How do you balance both of those things in your daily life?
Well, it's a very good question. And, I received many kind comments. And, I'm not in this alone. I have a wonderful caucus that's working with me that is also trying to be consistent in the messaging. But it comes down to really two things. On the one hand, we need to be confident about our future. What is taking place in the world right now is essentially a disagreement amongst OPEC members about market share and a challenging of the increased market share that the Saudis have taken on. There's been a conscious choice by OPEC to not intervene and just to allow market forces to take their course. It's not clear to me that is targeted at the United States. I think it's targeted at other players in the Middle East. I think it's going to have significant implications for people like the Russians. And in a sense, it's not really targeted at us. We're caught up in a circumstance not of our creation. And so this will pass. The one thing that we know about low oil prices is that they are the best solution. The best solution for low oil prices is low oil prices. And so prices will redound. They will come back. And what is not at issue is the long-term sustainability and viability of our energy industry. For sure, we need to be competitive, as you described, and we've become less competitive because of cost increases, labor increases in particular, and there's a lot that we need to do. But in the long term, we should be confident because this province has an enormously bright future. At the same time, we need to be realistic. And, we have not done a good job with our public finances. We have been living beyond our means. We have been living beyond our means in this province. We've been budgeting based on a plug number. The plug number is the oil price, and we have essentially been drawing upon between $8 and $10 billion of oil revenue on an annual basis to balance our budget. And suddenly that has evaporated. 15% of the province's revenue stream has evaporated. And so we can't go on like this. We can't continue to budget in this way. It is producing uncertainty. You described the 1990s, the 2000s, and the decade that preceded. This is not an appropriate way for us to be budgeting. And we are living beyond our means, and in a sense, we are living on resource revenue that properly belongs to our children and our grandchildren. And so it's time, I think, for all of us to recognize this, to look in the mirror, and to realize that we have to do something about it. So it's I guess at the end of the day, it's about an honest discussion that we have to have as Albertans.
Well, I think my experience speaking mostly with the business community on a daily basis is everyone's ready to have that conversation. I think everyone's pulled up their pants a little bit and said it's time for us to have that conversation. So I wish you well on that. But you still target something. You target $65 today in terms of the current budget going forward. And one thing we know is every economist is wrong. It's just a matter of by how much. So how do you
All the dismal science for a reason. Yeah.
It's not entertainment anymore, that's for sure. But how do you go forward with confidence now? Not getting into the specifics of the budget, but you enter into a budgeting process where eventually you have to pick a number and kind of go around that. How does that conversation take place within your team?
Well, I'm not going to get into disclosing the budget today, and frankly, because we're not ready. And I will tell you this, Minister Campbell and myself are working as hard as I've ever worked in my life in anything, and I've never been afraid of hard work. And so we had a 5-hour meeting yesterday of the new budget committee, and we've been met up until the 23rd of December, and work carries on. And so this is challenging. It's incredibly challenging. The last projections that we received from finance projected that oil prices on average for 2015-2016 would be $65 per barrel. That opens up a $6.275 billion hole in the provincial budget. The levers that we have at our disposal to deal with that are, on the one hand, expenditure containment. Secondly, revenue increases. And thirdly, the acceptance of some degree of deficit financing, supported by a $5 billion contingency that we do have in place. And so we really have only those three levers, and we're in the process of calibrating how we're going to put forward a budget that will be a multi-year plan, not a single-year solution, not an overreaction to the circumstance that we're in, but a multi-year plan that will deal with this circumstance and will begin to solve the problem on a permanent basis.
So I don't have the history of a lot of people, but I start back at Premier Klein and then Stelmach and then Redford, and each time the Premier comes in and talks about, and they kind of eliminate the discussion around sales tax, really get off on any discussion around taxes, and they tend to kind of point themselves in a corner, kind of bury themselves in a corner in terms of the levers they can pull. Not talking about specifically sales tax, but Alberta really hasn't had that discussion on a kind of a comprehensive approach to taxation policy in quite some time. Is the market ready for that discussion?
Well, I certainly hope so, because it's a discussion that we have to have, and I come back to the reality of a $6 to $7 billion revenue hole in 2015-2016. That does not get solved in a single year. Based on what we're hearing from our economists, it equates to then a $5.5 billion hole the following year, and a $5 billion hole the year after that. And so unless we deal with this and make some of the changes that need to be made, we're talking about eroding Alberta's AAA credit rating over the course of the next 3 years, and really imperiling everything that we benefit from in terms of having such a strong province fiscally. So it has to be dealt with. This will involve pretty extensive consultation with Albertans over the course of the next several months, and we welcome the views of people on taxes, and as well as on expenditure containment. It needs to be said that we have an Alberta advantage on every single element of public taxation. We are the most competitive jurisdiction in Canada, with one exception, which I'll just come to in a moment. On every level of taxation, every element of taxation, Alberta has the lowest taxes in the country by, in some cases, a vast, vast margin, not small increments. And so this is all something that needs to be discussed. I know there are many different opinions probably in this room relative to the wisdom of a sales tax. I don't think Albertans generally advocate a sales tax, but I'm prepared to be educated and to hear from people in terms of the discussion that we're going to have. But it's a time for people to speak up about this, and there have been some very constructive things. Each day in the newspaper, there have been constructive comments offered by former finance ministers. There's an excellent comment, I think, in the National Post today from Ted Morton that's worth a read, and others are chiming in and have a perspective.
All the ex-finance ministers come out now. I'm not sure why, but it's
easier to be an ex-finance minister, I think, than to be a finance minister.
And they all start their discussions with 8 years ago today I resigned, and they all do that, which is great. So education and healthcare. Education and healthcare are the two biggest expenditure pieces in the government, and we look at them as cost centers. But in my world, I look at them as economic drivers. We want to have the best healthcare system in the world, and we have the opportunity to actually build that with what we have in this city, certainly, and probably the best education environment around, because they are the fundamentals of healthy people, smart people that are economic contributors. So how do you, knowing that that's the target place to go after, but you still need to maintain that long-term vision of what we're trying to build here in those two sectors. It's got to be one of the biggest challenges for you.
Well, it is the biggest challenge, and let me speak truth to power. Power being the citizens of Alberta, not me as the premier. Healthcare. In the last 10 years, the population of Alberta has increased by 25%. In the last 10 years, our expenditures on health care have increased by 100%. We've gone from 2004 spending $8 billion per year to where we are today, which is $17.5 billion a year in 10 years. An annual compounded increase of, as I recall, 7.4% per year, now consuming 48% of the provincial budget. It's not sustainable. It is not sustainable. And, we all want to have the best public health care system in the country, nobody more so than me, but these kinds of public expenditures are not sustainable in our province. They weren't sustainable, frankly, at $100 oil. They're certainly not sustainable at oil prices that we're told that will be $62 next year. And so, we're going to have to be a lot more efficient about it. You made a comment in your opening remarks about labor costs. I'm not here to criticize, doctors or nurses or teachers, but in every level of public employment we are paying vastly more than anyone else in the country, and it's not sustainable. It is not sustainable as a business model. It wasn't sustainable with high oil prices, and for sure it's not sustainable with low oil prices. And so we're going to have to contain expenditures as we go forward. We're going to have to be measured and balanced about this. But there is only one taxpayer, and we're going to have to deal with this, and we're going to have to see in our partners, because I view them as partners, nurses, doctors, teachers, people in the healthcare system, the education system, the post-secondary institution, they are partners in the delivery of a high quality of public goods to Albertans. But we're going to have to start containing costs and ratcheting costs down. At the same time, being innovative and leading the country.
Right. And probably putting pricing back into the healthcare system, which I think from an economics point of view, you always have to have, otherwise there are no controls. So I really respect you being here today, but I also want to give you the opportunity to talk about what's next, looking out a few years. Often you go and you ask your people, your staff, to tighten their belts, hunker down, go through some tough times, but you need to give them a vision of what's next. and what we're doing this towards. And it's probably something you haven't been able to do coming in as Premier because you got slammed with this right away. But I'd like you to give the opportunity to talk about maybe that Alberta that you'd like to grow this into someday, and kind of expand on your vision that way.
Well, very, very good comment, and I welcome the opportunity to do that. And so again, I come back to a province that is confident, that is innovative, that is entrepreneurial, that is fiscally disciplined, and which really celebrates all of those characteristics, and which builds a thriving, innovative economy around those characteristics, and which is focused on the delivery of a high quality of public goods. It has to start with fiscal discipline to begin with, but certainly in the circumstance we're in, it must begin with fiscal discipline. And so I know this isn't the import of your question, but first and foremost, we need a fiscal plan that Albertans, that business owners, that people that administer our wonderful universities and colleges can look at and have certainty. And so it has to be a 10-year plan. It has to be implemented in a way that's measured and balanced, and doesn't, frankly, tip us into a recession. We are not in a recession in this province, contrary to what the conference board said yesterday, and I don't think we're going to be in one. But we need to have a long-term fiscal plan to get out of the circumstance we're in, and we have to be cognizant we don't make mistakes and go too far too fast. You know, if we do that and we maintain our fiscal advantage and we are innovative and we, focus, for example, here in Edmonton on a high quality of public goods, on our university. The University of Alberta is one of the finest universities in the world. It needs to be a flourishing, innovative, self-governing institution. The government needs to get out of its way in terms of the things that the University of Alberta can accomplish. And we need to make sure that it remains a center of innovation. We need to make sure that we unlock the intellectual property of researchers who are at the University of Alberta, and that we focus on venture capitalization and early stage commercialization of the intellectual property that's coming out of our universities and colleges, so that we diversify our economy, so that we get away from simply being a province that produces oil. It may always be the family business, but we have to diversify, and we need to expand the petrochemical industry, and we need to focus on other opportunities. So we need an economy that is more diverse, and I think we have it within our means. I think everybody knows my views in this room, I hope you do, about education. I was raised in a family where two things were valued above all else. One was hard work, and the other was education. They weren't negotiable. And so I think we should have the best education system in the country. I think we can afford it. I think we're innovative enough to create it, and I think we should make it a hallmark of who we are as a province. And so, we need a high quality of public goods, and this province is entrepreneurial, it's determined, it's excited. I find the challenges that we face right now to be daunting. I won't tell you that I don't. And we've been working very hard on it because we want to strike the right balance. But in the long term, you don't win a bigger lottery than to be an Albertan. And we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. And this province is going to carry on with a remarkable future that emulates what we've done in the past.
Well, Mr. Premier, I mean so sincerely when I thank you for being here, and respect your time as well, and we have to cut this off. I think one of the things you talked about is working with the University of Alberta to help solve the problem, to help make it better. And you've got a City of Edmonton, you've got arm's length organizations, you've got economic development authorities, tourism groups, all these groups that, a crisis creates a situation where we can realize we're all on the same team, throw down the gauntlet and the challenge and say, how do we redesign this? How do we make it better? How do we make it more efficient? And you've got 1.2 million people ready to help you at any point in time here. So on behalf of everybody in the room, behalf of the Mayor and the table that we've been sitting with, I'd like to thank you for coming and being on stage with us today. Had an opportunity to get to know a lot of Edmontonians, and I'd like to turn it over to you for some final words. But on behalf of myself, I'd just like to thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I think it's probably all been said, but we are all in this together. This is a remarkable province. We have a remarkable future. We're up to the challenges of low oil prices. We've dealt with it before, we'll deal with it again, and we'll get through this. And so, but it is a time, I come back to, it is a time for confidence and a time for leadership. It's not about one person. It's not about the Premier of the Alberta solely. I know I have a role to play. I reminded people, many of you may have heard of this, probably most of you haven't, but I reminded people there's a Spanish adage that for a trapeze artist to succeed, two things must be believed. First, the audience must believe that the trapeze artist can fly. And secondly, the trapeze artist must know that he cannot. And so I know I cannot fly. And we are all in this together, and there need to be people with safety nets, but we're all in this together. And so, you know, I intend as the Premier to deal with the cards that we've been dealt with, and you will see leadership, you'll see discipline, and you'll see tough decision-making over the course of the next several months as we deal with our budget. But it's not up to government alone, and it's going to take the leadership of all of the people who are represented in this room. So thank you very much for being here, and look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Premier Jim Prentice and Brad Ferguson. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Premier. Good job. You're a much nicer guy than I kind of thought, you know? You're just a fireside chat, and it's wonderful. Jim, thank you very much. That's excellent. We need a little fire there for Brad's fireside chat, though, I thought. Before we close, we'd like to draw your attention back to the Build It Here video, which we had earlier. And I know that you really enjoyed that, taking a look at that, and I thought it was a wonderful video. And Economic Development Edmonton wants to make sure that this video is going to be something that you can use all the time. So let me just tell you a little bit about the video. The Build It Here video is one that can be customized. And so Economic Development Edmonton wants you to go to its website, take a look at the customization that it can do. And so just reach them at their website. They'd love to take that video and use it for something that you can use for attracting new recruits, to attract new business, to help you build your business. And while you do that, you can help build the city of Edmonton. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for coming to Impact 2015. Been a wonderful program. My name is Greg.